All right, Tobias from Pay to Stay. Thank you for coming on the call for just a quick talk about the stability and production cost of Ergon.
Of
Um,
course.
I already warmed you up before the hitting the record button, so you know what we're trying to talk about. So, what, how does the theory of production costs like play into Ergon as a concept?
Well, I mean, Ergon is very like the genius behind it is that basically what you do is you have like in Bitcoin, every block basically generates the same amount of Bitcoin, but it halves um every 4 years. However, on Aragon, this doesn't change such that it depends on how much work you perform, right? So if the difficulty is very high, then you get more coins proportionally than if the difficulty is very low. And that way I mean, it's kind of like a labor theory of value, I guess, right? But like we have to like many people don't like that one, but like it kind of makes sense, right? Like if you require, I don't know, $5 to produce something, you're not gonna sell it below $5, right? You're gonna sell it for $5 or above. And that's basically the idea behind Ergon, that like if you make it such that every token requires a certain amount of hashes to be produced, then the miners will only sell above that cost, right? Of course, like like a huge asterisk there that like it's the mining costs vary, right? So this is not like a constant thing, which is why I think there will always be like some fluctuations in Aragon. But yeah, it we don't need to be precise, right? We just need to be good enough. And
Right.
it just so happens that mining does approach a little bit of a like since there's so much competition there, right? Like there's a ridiculous amount of competition. It does approach like kind of a relatively stable price there.
Right. So like comparative to the dollar right now, and where it's uh possibly trending historically because of devaluation, and a very ambiguous production cost because
Mhm.
the 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 supply adjustments are very like politically charged and centrally controlled. So um, you said it doesn't have to be precise. Um, how does it compare to the dollar in just the grand scheme of things? Not with current Ergon liquidity, but like if Ergon and the dollar had like the same volume and market cap and all of that, how would Ergon's stability play out?
Well, I mean, this is above my pay grade. Like I have like here's what I know. Here's what I do know. The Federal Reserve has been around for 100 years. They're some of the smartest and most cunning people in there. They have they are just hiring, like if you're like a really brilliant mathematician and stuff, they're just hiring you because they have all the money because like they make all the money. They have a huge incentive to get this right? Like they're like there's so many moving variables here. And we've seen it during COVID, right? Like they just increased the money supply absolutely like crazy, and it still works, right? So these people clearly know what they're doing, in my opinion. Like people disagree and be like, "Oh, those are all retards." It's like, no, 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 no. Like the fact that they could just increase the money supply, like they could just make double the money supply, basically. I don't know what the number was exactly, but like it's
Yeah,
around within that order. Um, and the fact that the economy just went on and nothing much happened, like prices increased a little bit, but like like all the Austrian economists that I saw were like, oh no, no, this is gonna cause like really big inflation. I mean, it caused some inflation, yes, absolutely, but it didn't cause like really big inflation.
right.
So I think we're like kind of underestimating the like how smart these people are in the Federal Reserve. They're also like cunning and evil, right? Like I'm not defending them, and I'm very much in favor of Ergon because it like makes it like so that you don't have to have these smart and cunning people, right? Like it just is like a system that works on its own. There's no oracles, there's nothing in there. It really like the blockchain itself is kind of an oracle, but you don't even need it, right? Like there's just one simple formula that makes that happen.
Yeah, well, like the energy itself is the oracle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's the we have to be careful that okay, like of course, Ergon is named after Greek for energy, right? But it is not actually that. It is actually the computation, right? So this the price is pegged to the cost of computation, and so this heavily depends on many factors, like how good the efficiency of the machines are, how cheap you can get them, how close you are to the silicon and chip design and so forth. So it's not directly energy, but I heard like I actually heard that the majority of the costs for hash is the capital expenses, right? Like that, it's not actually energy. I mean, it's like it's something like 2 to 3 or something. So more money goes into like making the machines that compute the stuff than you need from the electricity because it's actually like once you're at these scales, getting the electricity is actually not very difficult because there's a lot of like if you have good contacts to power plants, then often what they have is excess energy, right? It would go to waste, and what they do is sometimes they just heat stuff just to get rid of it. But with the mining stuff, you occasionally can get electricity for free, basically. So yeah, but at the end, it always boils down to some form of energy, right? Because like even
Right.
making the machines is requires energy.
Right. So it's not exactly hash, but it's the energy that goes into this like supply chain of that process of getting to the point where you have machines that are hashing with sunk capital.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that whole process being like tied purely to free market dynamics, is that more because you called the Fed very smart and cunning? And I personally agree with you because my friends who majored in economics, they're very much on the side of the Fed despite all of the evilness that goes on. Like they're aware of those, they're cognizant of the both of those facts. Do you think that the market dynamics that Ergon uses to achieve stability and supply elasticity is sufficient to replace the Fed?
Um, well, I'm not sure if we need, I'm not sure if we even need that. Because like really what we need is just to stay in competition there. Um,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, but I mean, we can look at history. So like I'm always a little bit careful with blockchain and comparisons to like digital gold or something. Like it is not digital gold because
Yeah.
like one thing that happens is that you can just fork it and then you have the double supply, right? And that is always an issue. Like like when people say like, oh, Bitcoin only has 21 million Bitcoin or something, then I'm say, well, what about Bitcoin Cash or what about BSV? Like all of them claim to be the real Bitcoin, right? Like this doesn't
Yeah.
happen in gold, right? There's like, no, actually gold, the
Yeah.
real gold has atomic number
Yeah.
52, not 71 or something. No.
Yeah.
Like everybody agrees. Gold, no, I think it's 71, whatever. You get my point, right? Like there's no dispute on like the nature of gold, right? But there's a dispute on the nature of Bitcoin, right? Like what is the real Bitcoin?
Right.
It's a purely consensus, right? It's purely whatever you believe it to be. Um, so I always say there's 63 million Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin BTC, Bitcoin Cash,
Yeah.
and PSV.
And
um, yeah, go
that's
ahead.
sort of in its way is like that's like a form, those derivatives are kind of elasticity of the money supply and of Bitcoin's because it's not actually 21 million. It's all of these forks together.
Hmm.
So when there's not enough Bitcoin to go around, there's a bunch of forks that make Bitcoin derivatives available to provide liquidity to the markets. and it just really, it's really up to the markets to decide like the legitimacy of those monies.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in the mind. Whereas with Ergon, you don't really have that. You have that a little bit, right? But like you have something to ground it in, which is the cost of one hash, right? Like if the cost of one hash goes up, then we would expect actually Ergon to go up, which kind of creates a weird incentive if you think about it, right? Like so Ergon really has an incentive to make mining as expensive as possible. But I mean, if you know, like let's say if you believe in like solar storms or something, that could happen in the future because you know, like we know there's polar drift, right? So the magnetic field has been shifting way more in the past few years than it did in like the past few hundred years. And if you think that could have any effects on mining equipment, then it's actually bullish on on Aragon. And I mean, most proof of work coins because like the costs of mining go up there. So to get to that point, like there's always a little bit of a danger of having a commodity money that is based on something that like isn't like super duper established, right? Like there's not really a secondary market for hash, right? But why was gold able to be the commodity for millennia? It is because there's a lot of secondary markets for stuff, right? There's jewelry, there's like just the medical properties of gold, right? There's all kinds of other things. Now even electronics, right? Like there's a lot of gold in electronics, and there's actually like people who just dissolve computer parts just to get the gold out there. There's a lot of secondary use cases for gold. Ergon and hash, they don't really have secondary use cases, right? You can only use a miner for solving SHA-256. And so I personally think that gold would be the best as a basis for an economy. Uh, but I mean, people may disagree, but yeah, I think that Aragon also, due to its stability, could be really, really interesting, especially in cases where you know need cashness, but you also need digital, and also where financial institutions are a problem. If you need all three, then gold isn't really a good option, and also it's starting to come, especially if you know the more the banks become overwhelmed and stuff, and just so much KYC, the more interesting these digital blockchains, digital cash systems are. Peer-to-peer digital cash systems are interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would really seem to be the case that because of the secondary markets and everything, that gold really would be king. But we are in a digital era, so we need digital currency. So we need something that's like, you know, heuristically close to that. And
Yeah, and also one thing that I want to mention is that we live in a in a world where there's so much debt, and that means that gold as a currency will not really be that interesting, right? Like it is too quote unquote hard of an asset, because like people don't want to really give loans, and people really want to use the dollar because it's so cheap, and you can just print it, and you can get a loan in dollars anywhere, right? It's really, really easy to just lend dollars. It's really, really hard to lend gold. Like nobody really does that. And that I think is why gold really is so, like just has an upper edge on that end. But it I think the majority is because like we are so addicted to debt that like we could like going to gold would be like a drug addict quitting heroin or something, right? Like this would be really, really difficult. So and I think the same is true for Aragon. Aragon is not at all debt-based money, right? It's kind of the opposite. So if we were all like telling people to use gold or Ergon is like telling an heroin addict to switch to water or something, right? It's like, well, but how do I get my dopamine or whatever you get from taking heroin? So that's like one uphill battle that I see for real money.
yeah, this is always an interesting topic to me, like the meta around how the type of base money that a society uses and has in circulation to fuel the economy, it affects the like psychology of people in such a way that like you say, like debt money is like a toxic drug that people are addicted to, and gold is like trying to get them off of that drug. And it would be like a huge benefit to society to get to not be addicted to a drug. Um, and it makes me interested in like the long term, in the grand scheme of things, the control of gold basically dictates the psychology of humanity. So if you were able to control the means of production of gold, or like the custody of gold and hold it, you could convince a society to get on a drug like a dollar, because you're saying that gold doesn't work and it's not suitable, so we have to use the dollar. And then you've successfully hijacked the economy, and you can extract wealth by being in control of the dollar. And it reminds me of these funny wacko theories that ancient alien civilizations come to Earth to take our golds to mine our gold and take our gold supply. And it's like, dude, it would be a
Which
it would make a cool, I'm saying it would make a cool sci-fi movie for alien races to control other societies by coming in and taking their golds, controlling their gold supply and getting them hooked onto fiat. And like,
Well, I mean, I think this is the truth. Like this is what actually happens. So I mean, not that the aliens or something do that.
right.
Like for me, aliens are always metaphors
Yes. Yeah.
for spiritual entities, and
Right.
yeah, but like we don't need to go that far, right? Like it's just that obviously like someone, if you don't really have too many morals and you're okay with hooking people on debt, then yeah, then you reap a lot of benefits. Like you just control all of society basically. And
Yeah.
yeah, and this is why historically usury, right? Like it
Oh,
kind of sounds like an ancient term, right? But like usury was banned it is still banned in Muslim societies, right? It
yes.
is
Yeah.
it is actually banned between Jews, right? So Jews can't
Yes.
lend each other money, but it's okay if they lend to non-Jews.
Yes.
And Christians just completely lost any sense
Yeah.
of usury, right?
I
Like
know.
it's just whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, well, isn't that peculiar, right? Like we have a society that's so degenerate that like especially in America, it's so bad. America is like super
I
bad. Like
know. Yeah.
like I have a German friend in America, and he tells me like, oh, like I got this car 0 down, right? Like I just signed the paper and I got the car, right? And now I have to like pay off the
Yeah.
financing. I'm
Yeah.
like,
But now they own your ass.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, wow, this is absurd. And he tells me it's absurd, right? But he's like, well,
Yeah.
what am I like? Why wouldn't I do this, right? Like, if is do, but like people, and there are people who are like super principled, who are like, no, I'm not going to take any debt and so forth. But
Yeah.
they have a disadvantage because they have less leverage, right? Like
Right.
they have less leverage with their money, and
Right.
yeah, and that's a huge
Yeah, I
issue.
don't I don't I don't take on under collateralized debt. I don't take on under collateralized debt out of principle. I know it puts me at a
Mm.
disadvantage, but it's just like I don't want to be owned by someone. I don't want to be indebted to people that I don't trust or don't like, or
Yeah, and we need more people like that because like it's way too easy to I also currently don't have that
yeah.
and I'm
Now
happy
we're going
about
into
that.
debt forgiveness, like in America.
Mm,
We're going to these cycles of take a bunch of debt and then have the government subsidize a forgiveness process and wipe away all that debt and make taxpayers pay for it. So
yeah.
we are subsidizing the drug addiction, the the heroin
Yeah,
dealers.
and I think that like we need to like I mean if you talk to an economist like so I think that we should get back to like where usury just is like you
Yeah,
don't do that, right? Which also means like we need a totally different money, right? Like we can't have the dollar because the dollar needs that to
yeah,
function, right? Like it gets
exist.
created like that's how the dollar gets created. It is
Yeah,
by taking a loan. That's the only way you can really really can create the dollar at scale. But if you have gold or something, then if you have gold, then it kind of becomes like relatively quickly obvious that, oh no, this usury thing, this is it's kind of a problem, and I think we need to go back there, but I don't think we'll go there back voluntarily. Like I think we'll
Yeah.
just keep spinning and spinning and spinning, and maybe some people are like, I'm just done, right? Like let me leave aside. They will have huge economic penalties for that, but they live principled and hopefully happy. Yeah, and we'll see where that goes. But for that, it's good if we have like a buffet of options available, right? Like we have gold, and gold is great, but it's more like for savings, and it's not really that liquid.
Yeah.
But what I like about Ergon, it has it's like a less useful form of gold, but because it doesn't really have secondary use cases, but you can use it, you can really transport it super easy, and it still has it's still
Right.
like non-debt money.
Right. It
And
has
yeah.
much higher liquidity potential because you can immediately and cheaply transfer it to for other assets and around the world. I
Yeah.
just wanted to back up for a second and talk about the lack of secondary markets in proof of work mining. Um, what about because I've heard these arguments and I don't really understand them fully. Uh, However, I have heard people saying that Bitcoin can be used, like mining can be useful for finding prime numbers, or
Mhm.
or you can you can do a proof of like generating like DNA like data,
Mm.
or what was the third one? I tried to write it down, but I can't understand my own writing. Um Dang it.
Well,
Oh,
that's an
heating.
issue.
Like
Heating.
heating,
That's
yeah,
true.
using the heat for those like
Yeah,
heating it.
we had one guy who the guy was Z, right? Like who built that?
Jay,
Huh?
Jay,
Jay. Oh
yeah,
yeah, was it Jay? Yeah.
just Jay, yeah.
So you had to go through to go through those. So number one is the prime number. So this would be a change of proof of work algorithm, because like right now what we do is we have SHA-256, which we try to find an inversion for, and this other algorithm that you mentioned is trying to find chains of prime numbers or something, which I mean, finding pre-image or like finding solutions for SHA-256, there's no known good use case other than like the proof of work itself. Finding chains of prime numbers, there actually like isn't a known use case for that either, but it may be useful in the future. So people
Yeah,
are like, okay, let's try those. But like this is very niche, right? Like this is a very niche use case. I'm personally not convinced that that is the way to go. Um, um, yeah, like it's kind of like forcing, like, oh, we really need to have a secondary use case for this, so let's just pick anything. The one with the DNA thing, I haven't. That's the first time I heard that. Is it related to protein folding, or is that
yeah,
something else? Okay, protein folding. Yeah. Well, I don't think that you can do protein folding in a trustless manner yet.
okay,
There is like a trusted kind of thing where like you like this is an actual thing that people do to they actually compete on there, and as of recent, like just recently, humans were the best at protein folding, right? This was just like a weird thing. Like to solve this algorithm, humans just happen to be the number one in finding solutions for that because it's like a human thing to do. Now AI is catching up because like AI is becoming more human-like in the way of approaching problems. So now AI is out competing there. So it might be useful if you find a way to put that into like a trustless way. I really like SHA-256 because it is so simple, it is so ubiquitous, right? Like what we're communicating right now, there's SHA-256 all over the place, right? Like
yeah,
the signatures, the everything, it's everywhere. And also like like old devices also support it, right? Like so you can use these older devices to do proof of work verification, which may or may not be useful in the future. So that's why I like that one. But the last one with the heating, I definitely agree. So I think that that could in the future become really useful. Unfortunately, you have a little bit of a matchmaking problem because um, like there really has to be a significant advantage there because like it will always be cheaper to go to like really remote places that have just happen to have a power plant or something that's underused. It's going to be cheaper to mine proof of work there, and but yeah, I'm um like I don't know, this is just like just one problem that you could face there, right? Because like Jay had issues with getting that adopted, with getting that into a bigger audience. um but yeah, I do think that that is a very interesting use case, where you like if you need to turn electricity into heat, you might as well do it in a way that in the process creates some proof of work. So that's
Right.
yeah, that's definitely something that could be a secondary use case. But it's kind of like okay, if we're going to do this anyway, let's try to be efficient there.
Yeah. So the like in a place like Alaska where it's very
Mm.
remote and someone needs to like heat their cabin, they could be hashing instead of burning wood, you know. And
Mm.
so I'm just saying that these secondary use cases that are these potential secondary use cases, they're like heating, for example. It may be hard to find like the right pairing in the situation where it works, but they do like hypothetically exist, these secondary use cases for Bitcoin
Mm.
proof of work.
Yeah, but it's not going to be like a big industry, in my opinion. I mean, it's going to be cool, but it's not going to be like the jewelry industry or the computer parts industry or something. But yeah, but to be honest, like there's a good case to be made that you don't want those secondary use cases. Like ideally, you would just have like a brick that everybody just accepts has the value because like then outside forces, right? So
Right.
if suddenly like people get really interested in jewelry, then suddenly that'll kind of increase like the costs of everything, right? Because
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the gold becomes more valuable, things like that. And there are some MMT advocates that make a good argument against gold as a medium of exchange. I personally don't buy into that, but there's some good points where they say like basically you have the money where like you just limited by this precious metal, right? But yeah, I don't think if you come from a debt-based money system, then yeah, that is definitely the case. But yeah, we've had gold. We have a gold standard for thousands of years, and that worked pretty well. So yeah, I think that's a good attestation to that.
Yeah. Is MMT like ultimately like, because you said like cash makes it like the cash wouldn't have like secondary use cases like jewelry and such. So is it like abstracting away um these real world use cases to like to
Well, the dollar has a secondary use case, and that is taxes, right? If you if you don't pay your taxes, you end up in jail, right? Like that's basically the use case of
right.
the US dollar. And that is what MMT advocates, and some of them are really making a good case. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's not sufficient, right? Like, yeah, that makes sense, but I don't think that's a sufficient stop to so we don't have like a debt-based addicted
Yeah,
country, right?
yeah, it's like a
Um,
big ethical concern, right?
mm. Yeah, exactly. And MMT doesn't deal with that. I think MMT has a good description, like a relatively good description. I don't think their prescription is very good. As often, right? Like Marxists are the same, right? Like Marxists have like a really good description often, right? Like they're really like, oh, like because they're very getting into the weeds, and some capitalists are like, oh, the market will figure it out, right? And some are like, actually, like like there's these inherent pressures, XYZ, like they call it contradictions, but Yeah, and but the prescription is absolute horseshit, right? Like this
Right.
clearly doesn't work, and people refuse to acknowledge why it doesn't work, which is really surprising. It's like, okay, if you're really good at like describing the problem, why are you so bad at prescribing a solution? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like MMT, like I feel like they understand the need for liquidity in markets very well, but they also sort of, if I understood the very like surface level understanding of it, they just say like a nation can like take on as much sovereign debt as it needs to fulfill liquidity demands, basically.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Have you ever heard the,
Oh,
oh, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead.
one thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the inelasticity of Bitcoin, because this is actually super contentious. If you wanna talk about that, because Bitcoiners and also e-cashers, they for some reason seem to think that if we just increase the number of people using eCash and Bitcoin, it's just going to stabilize the price. And I'm like, well, I don't know, like the rules of supply and demand still apply, right? Like wouldn't like if suddenly production cost of a Bitcoin becomes really low, wouldn't that tank the price regardless of liquidity and
Right,
stuff? I mean, of course it depends like how big is the production compared to liquidity and so forth. But it just seems like you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot by creating like this hyper illiquid or like hyper
right,
inelastic. That's what I wanted to use. Hyper inelastic token because like I think Bitcoin is the only asset or like the only thing, like I wouldn't call it an asset, but like the only countable thing that has that inelastic of a supply, and it's still kind of like usable
right, 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 right.
as a payment thing,
Yeah,
because like you only have like you always have 6.25 and soon that'll halve, right, because of the halving, um, every 10 minutes on average, right? Like there's nothing that reacts, like it doesn't increase if demand increases, doesn't decrease if demand decreases, it always stays the
yeah,
same. So the only thing that can react is the price, right? So it can only go up in price if demand increases because supply doesn't increase, and that's a feature for them. But in my opinion, like no, like this is not something that will become money. It may stay, like in my opinion, I'm still like bullish on eCash as a payment system because it's gonna be like the payment rails, right? It's gonna be payment rails, but the actual value will be something else, right? Like US dollar or other currencies or gold, right? Like maybe there will be
right.
I had to talk with someone who's like, oh, people are getting more interested in blockchain and gold and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, well, um, if there's a way to do that, then I think that could be very interesting for people.
Yeah, I mean, um, okay, I will mention this one thing. The rails having a different value for the money. I agree, it makes sense. But about the rails of eCash are still based on an inelastic asset. So when the demand for using those rails go up, the demand for the inelastic asset goes up, and it causes these um, price bubbles and burst. So these boom and bust cycles within the network that are inherent to the network. So it sort of still stunts the growth potential of the network itself, even if you are using a stable asset on top of it.
Now, what stunts the growth potential?
The eCash itself, it being used as a Rails, it needs you need to pay the network in or the miners in fees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the fees are in that base asset, which is inelastic. So as the demand for the network goes up, the because of supply and demand, the price of that inelastic asset fluctuates dramatically. And
Yeah.
it causes these boom and bust cycles, which end up crippling the economy, even if you do have a stable medium of exchange on those payment rails.
Yeah, I mean, I think the market will just find a solution for that. Like, it's not because I think at some point holders will be like, okay, well now I kind of want to cash in on that, right? Like, give me goods and services in exchange for and or like probably that'll be stablecoin in exchange for you being able to use the network. So I think it'll balance out, and as soon as you have an industry, right? So pay to stay would be one of those industries, hopefully, that is like in demand of Satoshis, right? Like it's like, hey, like we need to send transactions and the transactions require Satoshis. Give us some of those. It creates like like it creates some demand on that side. So yeah, that and what that implies, in my opinion, is that there will be like there will be necessity for more stability on that front, right? So, I mean, it's still gonna be relatively like there's still gonna be swings, but I think what will happen is that more and more people will like make like long-term contracts of like, hey, like if you give me the XYZ, you'll have uh, like for a long period you will be able to pay at this fixed rate or something, right? So and this
Mhm.
could be beneficial for both sides, right? Like the miner can have a guaranteed stream of income, and it's like, okay, like I know how much hash power will give me this much whatever, and I can provide the tokens there. Yeah, so I'm not too worried on that front. Also, what can always happen, like there will the pay to stay at some point might just start mining themselves, right? Like, and then the transactions are like quote unquote free, right? Like they just cost proof of work instead of costing tokens.
Yeah,
And then it's like a little bit independent from there. I'm not sure where that'll go exactly. In my opinion, if eCash had Ergon's model, it would make even more sense because then you really have like if you have this payment rails philosophy, then uh, then it really becomes like oil more or less, right? Like because it has some like the more work you
right.
put in, the more quote unquote oil you get and so forth. So I think it makes more sense even in a payment. Ergon makes more sense in a payment rails world,
Right.
but Ergon really has the goal of really being a kind of a unit of account, kind of ish. Whereas I don't think eCash can really do that or should do that.
Yeah.
But I think it will. I mean, as soon as you have it as like an industry thing, right? Like it's kind of like necessary, then there will of course be people who use it as a medium of exchange because it's the native thing, right? It's very easy to use.
Yeah.
And actually, most eCash transactions right now are just plain eCash being sent around. And yeah, so I'm really curious to see where that'll go as more companies like Pay to Stay emerge, right? There's also Badger LLC who's doing
Right.
stuff on eCash as they're having bucks, very interesting stuff. And yeah, I'm curious where it'll go.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we have to like watch develop because it hasn't really played out at scale yet. So
Mm,
we don't even know. So I won't even argue against that. But yeah, I definitely agree with the payment rails philosophy and the eCash, the token, I mean, sorry, the coin is just an inherently essential part of the network to have its own native medium of exchange that also simultaneously acts as an incentive mechanism to secure the network. So
mm.
it is just a highly secure payment rail for stuff. And yeah, I'm definitely interested to see where that theory goes, but I agree. Like having something like Ergon makes more sense in the context of the asset being used as sort of a digital oil because in oil being elastic, you need more oil, you extract more oil and there's more oil to circulate and serve to fuel the economy. And it's just that I'm just concerned that if it was an inelastic asset, being that said digital oil, that yeah, the price of the supply and demand imbalance of oil, like we don't have that problem because oil actually is an elastic commodity. But if it was purely inelastic like Bitcoin, and like Bitcoin, even though it has a supply schedule where supply, like, you know, expands and then slows down and then comes to a halt, um, the inelasticity of it reminds me of something like a painting, like the Mona Lisa, where it's purely inelastic. Like the Mona Lisa's supply does not react to demand whatsoever,
Mm.
and Bitcoin's supply has the same nature. So, yeah, fueling the economy with the Mona Lisa makes less sense to me than fueling it with oil in a metaphorical sense, just because of the elasticity.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so and the other thing is like without supply expansion, you have like these I'm sorry, not elastic. You have these liquidity um these like basically liquidity crisis, like a nation that's trying to adopt Bitcoin like Venezuela, um assuming that they need more liquidity to fuel their economy, they can't access that liquidity at a fair, like stable market price consistently, because buying it up pushes the price up, and there's no supply expansion to react to that increase in demand. So essentially, everyone's bidding for the same liquidity instead of there being like an abundant amount of liquidity that all nations can access at an equal pace or an equal rate, basically.
Mm.
So
There's
liquidity is,
also one there's also one idea, also by like I think Vin, the same guy who did the bugs and postage protocol. Like he has this idea that like you can do a not a stable coin, but like a token that is similar to Ergon, which is all it's mineable, but the cost of mining is there's an oracle that sets the kind of like difficulty ratio, right? So Ergon does it automatically through a formula, but there would be an oracle because it is based on the price of electricity in some area in the world, so such that it will always cost the same amount of kilowatt hours to mine that token. And the Oracle makes sure that it is actually in kilowatt hours in that area
right.
based on current prices for a hash. I don't know how that was determined again exactly, but yeah, this is also something very interesting because then you do have kind of like digitized kilowatt hours, right? Because it does take that much energy and it is also decentralized, right? You do have one trusted oracle though, but
Yeah.
you know, like since they don't like if they publish all their data on chain, then
Yeah. Yeah. I
that
mean,
would be a really
assuming
cool
the
thing.
yeah, assuming the Oracle works, that would be like an incredibly interesting concept. Especially to see how like the dynamics play out in the real world. Because like I don't know, I'd have to think about it a lot more, but it makes me think like, so different countries have different they have different costs of kilowatt per hours, and this oracle gives them like specific to their region um um costliness, so that everyone pays the same to mine one unit of the asset.
Mm.
And what I'm wondering is like, does that open Pandora's box of potential like wars being waged over land where the mining is cheaper than
Well, that's actually one critic point that MMTers make about gold, that like gold creates this incentive to invade other places because like you have something physical to take. Um, And I think I'm like, okay, well, I don't know, like it kind of makes sense, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure. And
I mean, MMT people, they have good arguments for stuff. I won't deny it.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they're, as I said, I'm not sure if their prescription's good, but they're not dummies. I mean,
Right.
there's this one guy on Twitter, I think Pierre Berlund. I don't know if you know him. He's like a also an economist guy, and he's always trashing MNTers. And I'm like, come on, like some arguments are actually kind of good. Like you're being a little like throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. People do that so much with politics and economics.
mm,
Like
mm, mm.
anything that involves psychology, people always tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that was always my goal as like an independent researcher in economics was to find like the silver lining in each school and try to like unify these concepts. Um, to basically unify like a torn apart humanity. I mean civilization because
Yeah.
we're psychologically torn to shreds right now with all these people like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly. And yeah. And so I don't know, like for me right now as an entrepreneur, I will just use the best tool for the job. And that
yeah,
happens to be like the token that we made, right? Like on eCash. eCash has really, really good support, yeah, like a great infrastructure. Some of which I built myself, of course, and Ergon is being able to leech off of that a little bit.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
I
That's
mean,
always that's always fun.
for me, Ergon is like a big experiment that seems
Yeah,
like when he started it, I'm like, okay, whatever, bro. I like support you in spirit, right? But I don't know like if this is gonna stick around or I think you'll just give up and whatever. But no, it's still there. I'm like, okay, well, like props to that, right? Like let's see where the next 2 years go.
yeah.
And yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm hoping for sure that I can make it like a $1 million market cap by the end of 2 years. Like that would be the bare minimum of my goal for it. But yeah, and like the people who support in modern monetary theory, like my friend who's an economist is his name is Jay, and he always said Bitcoin was trash because it was so
Mm,
volatile. And I tried to get him to see the silver lining in it, in which that Bitcoin or eCash can be like a payment rails for like a trustless environment for exchanging value. And there's like trade-offs. So yes, it's inelastic, but it has these like inherent properties that are so good. But then after I discovered Ergon and found out that you can still have these trustless properties and elasticity and price stability, I had to call him up and I was like, you were right all along about Bitcoin and I was wrong. Like
mm, mm. That's
yes,
good.
it has useful things, but if you have something that's like has all those useful things and has stability, like Ergon, it's like you kind of have to look at Bitcoin and like say, I'm sorry, but yeah, at this rate, it is kind of trash. But
Yep. Yep. No, and it took a while for me to realize that too, because
yeah,
it's so like the 21 million meme is so, so strong in Bitcoin.
yeah,
It's the hardest, and it's the dumbest meme, and it's the hardest to kill. I think, I mean, Satoshi didn't know better, right? And he was so humble about it, right? I think he was like, okay, like if this is gonna have any value whatsoever, let me like make it super scarce, right? It is in the Bitcoin white paper, right? So this like you could argue that like Aragon is straying from the white paper, so it is not real Bitcoin. That's okay. And but when you like read at like like imagine Bitcoin gets any price at all, right? So like then you can suddenly transfer value trustlessly because like you can just buy some Bitcoin, transfer it over to the next guy, and then he can sell it again, right? Which is what happens a lot of the time, right? This is actually how people use Bitcoin a lot who need to use it. Um, So he has been right on that, but I think and I don't think he ever made claims that Bitcoin will become stable or something. This was
No.
something that later people kind of like inferred, and I'm like, your arguments are not really convincing.
Well, I've seen one particular message from Satoshi, and it could be totally forged because it was just sent to me by another team, Ampleforth. But there was
Should be
allegedly.
easy to check. There's not a lot of writing from Satoshi.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure it is legitimate, but I didn't verify it myself. But there was a message from him that said that he acknowledged that an elastic supply would be better for Bitcoin, but he didn't know how to do that without introducing a trusted third party.
I see.
So he just made it a fixed schedule because
Which is
that
interesting because it's kind of obvious the way
yeah,
Ergon
yeah,
does it. It's like
yeah,
almost like the dumber way.
yeah. I mean, to me, it's like it's just like any sort of progression of innovation and technology. Like Bitcoin was like the fax machine, and Ergon is like the phone or the internet.
Mm, mm,
It does just build off of these ideas, and people didn't like think about the most optimal method of like communication initially. So yeah, it definitely just seems like Satoshi didn't think of everything, right?
mm,
He came up with a lot of things, but he didn't come up with everything. And yeah, it shows because we have thousands of cryptocurrencies all trying to solve different things, basically. And supply is just another one of those things. So like you said, it's kind of intuitively obvious the second you talk say how Ergon works. It's like just make the rewards proportional to people's effort.
mm. Right. It's like,
But
what?
I think he was so fixated on like thinking that okay, I don't know how to make an elastic supply trustlessly, so I'll do a fixed supply. And how do I do a fixed supply? I need a difficulty adjustment so there's the same amount of tokens every 10 minutes. So it just seems like because he was intentionally trying to do a fixed supply that he didn't think of elastic to begin with because he didn't think it was possible. But I don't know. I don't know. Um, I have no idea. But the Bitcoin meme of um 21 million is like I don't think it's a meme that Satoshi ever thought of, but if you read the book The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean
Mm,
Ammous, he really pushed the idea that Bitcoin's fixed supply made it like the perfect measuring stick for
yeah,
economic value. And
that's just so dumb.
yeah, I remember sharing that with Licho, and he's like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But I feel
It's
like to
like the thing is, it makes sense if
yeah,
you like don't think about it. It's like, oh yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
true.
yeah,
Like you just create this fixed thing, and then
yeah,
the entire world
yeah,
around goes around that thing. It's like,
yeah.
no, that's
Because
not
they're
how
like
it works.
the ruler is fixed. It's always 12 inches, so it makes sense to make a coin where the supplies. But the fixed ruler thing more applies to price than supply. It's like something with a fixed price is more like a constant ruler to measure value. The
Mm,
the fixed supply is like it's a perfect measurement of value capture. Like if you own 20% of the Bitcoin supply and Bitcoin demand for Bitcoin goes up 100%,
yeah, yeah,
you've
you do measure that,
yeah,
but
you
it's like, okay,
capture
what's the point?
you get
Like it just
20% of the value added to the demand of the network. So yeah, it's just like I said, it's like a type of store of value, although Licho doesn't like to call it a store of value because the price is so volatile and it's more of a speculative asset. But it really goes back to that idea that Bitcoin is like it's like the Mona Lisa. It's like if you want to hold your
mm,
money somewhere where it will probably appreciate over time and you don't want the value to be quote unquote diluted by price expansion. Um, even though that's like a false like equivocation or whatever, because
Mm,
like Ergon's supply expands without diluting the purchasing power. So um yeah, it's more like it's just weird. It's the opposite of inflation, like the hyper deflationary nature of Bitcoin.
mm,
It's just the inverse. So if you want to hedge against all sort any sort of like price expansion and dilution, you go into Bitcoin because it's like the
yeah.
inversion
I really
of
like the term hyperdeflationary. It's like yeah, this is too
yeah, yeah,
much.
yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah. It's just the inverse of hyperinflation. And I don't
mm,
see how people they don't see that as a problem. And I'm like,
mm,
really? You don't think that this could end horrifically just like hyperinflation? It's like having
mm,
elasticity is just it's so much more beautiful and like it's elasticity is like a miracle compared to like inflation and deflation.
mm,
I love I've always been in love with the concept of it. And ever since I like took my first day in school in like high school economics and
mhm,
they talked about perfect elasticity as like a
mhm,
theory of like perfect elasticity. And I'm like, yeah, that's so awesome. And later on that's why I got into Ampleforth because the supply would expand and contract um with near perfect elasticity. But the UX of it is terrible.
mm.
The prescription of it is terrible. But the idea of having like a near perfectly elastic asset was a good idea. And it's like Ergon is just so much better at it. And yeah, that's why I
Yeah,
love it.
but and it's so much dumber at it. It's like really the simplicity. It's really
Yeah.
the simplicity of it, which that I really admire because it's like yeah, like you just and like it's always so funny to like hear Carol talk about all his worries that he had. It's like, oh no, what if the difficulty adjustment just goes crazy wild? Because like we got these swings here and then we got these swings here and combined they make mega swings or whatever. But in reality, you don't have that at all. You actually have like a really stable they cancel out actually, and you get like where it doesn't matter. Like if you have swings, I mean, like you do have problems with confirmation times because you do have swings, but like they don't matter, right? Like they don't matter. They still keep the coin stable, and yeah, and I mean maybe at some point, I mean I kind of say it, like I do mention it in the Ergon chat that we could do real-time targeting, basically where you try to hit 10-minute blocks. Like if there hasn't been a block in a while, you just decrease the difficulty. Ergon could be one of the few coins where that even works, right? You
Yeah.
probably need something like Avalanche to synchronize clocks so people don't like pretend to go into the future because that just breaks everything. Um, but yeah, so all these things can be fixed at some point, and yeah, curious where it'll go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Aragon's definitely like the next leap in ideas. Like it's a good idea that will probably um create or generate or like inspire new ideas such as what you're talking about
Mm.
with this with the targeted block time. So I'm interested to see where it goes. And I hope that the most of the innovation stays on Ergon because I it would just there's nothing wrong with it at the end of the day, but it's such a headache for me when a concept like Bitcoin turns into 1,000 forks of Bitcoin.
Mm.
It just it's like different disparate networks makes it harder for people um to unify around like specific solutions. So it's like now you have like 1,000 networks, and if you want the solution to one problem, you go on one network. If you want the solution to another problem, you go on another network. And I don't know, it's like that's kind of like it's like the fractal nature of Bitcoin forks. And yeah, like I
Yep.
said, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm sure it's going to happen inevitably to Ergon anyway, but I hope that Ergon gets a lot of the things right so that it doesn't have to splinter too much.
Yeah,
So
I
we
mean that's
don't
one
want contentious
criticism
splinter.
that will, I mean, one thing that is really difficult on Aragon is forks, right? Because like think about it, you just double all the existing
Yeah.
coins.
Yeah.
So what you really have to do is like you can only really have amicable forks that say, okay, well, we like devalue each of our token, or like, or what you could also do is like, oh, if you use it on one chain, you automatically burn it on the other chain or something like that, right? Like you really have to do a lot
Yeah.
of work to keep the economic properties of Ergon. So this is something that we know what happens on other chains. We have absolutely no idea what happens on Ergon. Like it could be that there's like a huge, because like if it splits it in perfectly in two or like 60-40 or something, this could really mess the
Yeah.
system up.
And
But yeah.
it's actually funny you say that. Like to make it work, you would have to do something like destroying the coins on one network to use it on the other network. Because when I first got into crypto and was learning about forks, that's how I thought forks worked.
Oh,
And I was disappointed to find out that that wasn't the case. I'm like,
Hmm.
so wait, when Bitcoin Cash was created, all Bitcoiners just got an equal amount of that token.
Yep,
It's
yep,
like free money.
exactly, exactly. And
So
that's why so
it
many forks
incentivizes
work.
forks.
Yeah, it does,
Yeah.
exactly. And on I don't know what happens on Aragon. Like, I mean, you can maybe make
Right.
simulations or something. There isn't really, I don't think there's really an incentive to do it. Also one thing that I think is really cool that in theory, if you could do a mineable SLP token or ALP token or something on any blockchain, but you set the terms exactly the same as on Ergon. So what you could do in theory is you could have Ergon as like this unit of account, but anyone can create it on its own blockchain and use it
Mm.
on that thing. So if I have some time spare, which I don't think will be the case, I might set up a Ergon token on eCash that is not like bridged or something, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no like right to redemption or something that you get even technically. It just happens to cost exactly the same to produce and same algorithm and everything as Ergon, which I think would be like this could be really interesting, right? Because like then you have like these different tokens, they all like cost the same to produce. Well, shouldn't they have the same like price, right? And then you can have like these markets where like can swap one token versus the others, and it like if you really have a lot of AMA, not AMA, AMM, sorry, AMM, then you should really have like this almost like interchangeable tokens, but I don't know, like
Yeah.
something interesting.
That'd be awesome. And it would be like it would be really good for cross-chain liquidity, like being able to do that on any chain. Um yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe Jay can do something like that, but it I just was thinking I haven't heard from Jay like all
Yeah,
week.
he vanished.
Yeah.
But you also vanished for a time.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I don't blame him at all. But I'm wondering if like starting to do all the public calls spooked a lot of people in the chat.
Hmm.
Like
Well,
Andy, he was like, I'm glad I missed the chat because I don't know about wanting to be on a podcast or anything."
hmm.
So
Well, I don't know. I like speaking. Um,
yeah, yeah,
I can promote my ideas here. Also, like go to paytostay.com and sign up to our email list. We
yeah,
haven't posted anything there yet, but
yeah.
yeah,
I'll be
should
sure
I
to
need to
add
be
link whenever you're on. I'll add the pay to stay link in the bio. I mean
yeah, I'm
in
terrible at promoting my
the
own stuff. Except
yeah,
when it's like super technical or it's like a theory or something.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, well, I don't make any money from that, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to say like I'll give you like a free sponsorship. I'll be like this video is sponsored by Pay to Stay at the beginning.
That's good. Yeah, go to paytostay.com and sign up to our email list.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. All right. So that was a lot and I don't want to make
Yeah,
another
it's going.
3 hour
I'm
podcast.
sometimes too generous with my time, but I'm just like this rambler guy who just likes to
Yeah,
talk about
and it's
stuff.
good
And
content.
you shamelessly exploit that, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I've never tried podcasting in my entire life, and people always said you should do it. And this, like these past couple of days when I had the energy for it, and I'm like, oh, fuck it, I should just do it for Ergon and
Hmm.
just start doing it like as much as possible until it clicks. And I'll be having different guests, so it's like it's bound to grow because of the guests I'm going to be having on. They have big audiences. Like I'm talking to other projects to have them on and talk about their
Mm, mm,
coins
mm.
as well.
And why Ergon is better?
Yeah. I'll have
Yeah.
them. I'm basically gonna ask them all, like, hey, why aren't you building on Ergon, by the way? But
Well,
yeah,
Ergon doesn't dish out money, so that's
yeah.
a downside.
No free ride. But
Mm.
yeah, it was awesome talking. Thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. And I always have something new to say, right? It's like
Yeah.
endless.
Yeah, as long as we're not just, talking about these like arbitrary, like very like surface level, oh, I can't think of the word, but just like not deep thought, like and compelling theories and stuff like that, but just like saying like word salad, like as long as
Mm.
the podcast doesn't devolve into just pointless word salad, that and I don't think that's the case when the Ergon community comes on to talk, because we actually have, I don't mean to flatter us, but we have interesting things to talk about. So it's always good content. And I think people are going to
Absolutely.
value it
And at
once
some
they.
point again, you can have me on again and I can just talk about pay to stay. It's just like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the
I don't have, yeah, we went too long on this one, but I did want to ask more questions about pay to stay and how it doing that in a trustless environment like improves it in different ways, because I did want to ask
Mm-mm-mm.
that. But one last thing is did you ever play RuneScape?
I did not. I did not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not.
So
I'm actually. Like I never really I like never really was a gamer, right? Like I had
okay.
my phase where I like just played video games and I played a lot of Age of Empires. I
Yeah.
played a lot, like way too much. It's Age of Empires 3 even, like, even when there wasn't even the thing anymore. Minecraft, way too much Minecraft. You would think Redstone, but I had a friend who like was totally into Redstone and I was totally into programming at that point. And I don't know, like it kind of freaked me out because like to do these like tiny things that like were just like one line of code in programming, you had to build like these huge systems in Redstone. I'm like, I don't know, like it seems like I need to get a PhD just to build like small things. And why don't I just like build normal? So I just spend my time building houses and digging for diamonds or something, which
Yeah.
for me as a programmer makes much more sense than trying to program Minecraft anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
and League of Legends, that was like such a huge time sink. League of Legends, but at some point I don't know, I just lost interest. Like I think I just grew up and was like, okay, well now there's no time for games anymore. Now I'm morphing into a human man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's just that I was a RuneScape nerd when I was a kid,
Mm.
and it I didn't realize it until probably I got into crypto, but RuneScape gave me this like, because they have an in-game global exchange.
Mm.
So
That
everything
is
is a free market price, and it all depends on supply and demand, and all of the
mm.
things in RuneScape are elastic to different degrees, and some things are super rare and inelastic. And like people like go on the exchange and they speculate on the price changes of assets and invest in assets in the game. And it's like little kids were like learning how to use free market exchanges.
That
Like,
is so cool, man.
yeah, yeah. So and the in-game currency is GP, gold pieces, and that itself is elastic in the sense that you have to get gold pieces by um killing monsters and stuff like that. So you have to spend time going out into the wilderness and killing monsters to quote unquote mine the coins into existence.
You have
So
to
the
put in
more,
proof of work. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah, exactly. It's like RuneScape was kind of proof of work to a degree
Yeah, except
before
it wasn't
bots got
decentralized and
involved.
stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I love that there was always digital currencies in one form or another, whether it was in a video game or whatever. But there was stuff before Bitcoin that just had the essence of Bitcoin in it.
mm-hmm. And that is so cool. Yeah, I like that. And I kind of want to have like that's kind of like my goal a little bit with this like this plugin system, right? Because like it would be really cool if you could just write like
Yeah,
like it starts as like this just like this super dumb thing where like all you do is like you create gold or something, so like a really stupid process, but then like people build on top of that and you can
yeah,
generate other resources or something. I don't know, that's kind of like my vision there. I have zero time to do that, but if, like usually it is like build it and they will come, right? Like if you build like a really easy to use simple system, then people will just go crazy, and this guy will do this and like, oh, actually like I built I built this on top and whatever. But yeah, let's see. Will
yeah,
be interesting to see.
yeah. That's awesome. But yeah, we can talk more about that next time and talk more about pay to stay next time because I do
Mm.
want like a big coverage of pay to stay, like a whole episode. Because
Yeah.
I that's just it's a cool rabbit hole that I haven't had the time to explore, and like talking to you about it would definitely expedite that process of understanding the like theory behind it more.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
because you know once Ergon meets certain criteria, it can be used on pay to stay, and I think that'll be an important market in the future to get Ergon some real world use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And yeah, I'm curious if like because there's basically two ways that we could integrate Ergon into pay to stay. One is just as like a thing that you can buy self mint or like that you can buy tickets with. And then but the rest is all in our US dollar pegged currency, or we might even make like a completely separate system that is just all in Ergon, right? Like everybody gets paid in Ergon and so forth. I'm not sure if that makes a ton of sense, but there's nothing technically preventing us from doing that. And I think the second one is kind of like something that maybe in like 10 years or something might make sense. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once Ergon's like liquid enough, it'll be usable for pay to stay, and I'm wondering how much liquidity it's going to require, but it's
Mm.
probably not like an insane amount.
Like and for me it's almost more like an insurance, right? Because like right now there's not really anything that you can like if you want to have like actual customers that aren't degenerates that gamble money and do nothing else. If you have actually people who want to use pay to stay for events and stuff, you need to have a good unit of account there, right? Like right now this is the dollar because this just works the best. um but if like the regulations on there become like super duper strong,
Right.
I don't think like I think it'll be very very like Elizabeth Warren, she wants to regulate
Yeah.
like a wallet is now a financial institution, right? Like what like if you can do a curve multiplication, then suddenly you're a financial institution. Like I don't think that's
That's
that's very
crazy.
reasonable, but yeah, this is the world that we live in, and I don't think that'll work. So I think with Aragon, you like really create this system that like it can kind of just run on its own and like doesn't really need any input if you like any like trusted parties at all. And I think that could and then if you protocolize pay to stay, then you just have this machinery that like where like nobody is in charge and stuff. And yeah, and that's kind of really kind of interesting. So yeah,
All
let's
right.
do a podcast on that.
Yeah.
And once we did that podcast, then we can do another podcast with my co-founder. I think
Yeah.
he'll be on because he likes talking just like me. He's worse than me actually. So
Nice. I can exploit that.
yeah,
All
yeah. All right, sounds
right.
good.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks, man,
much,
for
dude.
doing these.
Yeah.
Say what?
I said thanks so much, dude.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we said the same thing simultaneously, so it canceled
Yeah.
out.
All right, man. Catch you
Yeah.
later.
Talk to you later. Bye bye.
See ya.